The sea had gone quiet. Where once the rhythmic pulse of waves had scored humanity's existence, now there was only the hollow scrape of metal struts against an emptying basin. From the observation deck of New Atlantis, Dr. Kai Mercer watched the last shimmer of Pacific waters spiral downward like bathwater down a drain. Except this drain stretched 12 kilometers into the sky, disappearing into the belly of what the media had dubbed the space serpent. 3 days since its arrival, 3 days of helplessly watching as the creature, if one could call something of such impossible scale a mere creature, positioned itself in low Earth orbit and extended what appeared to be a proboscis of unimaginable proportions. 3 days of evacuation alarms, of governments collapsing, of humanity facing an extinction event unlike anything conceived in their darkest nightmares. Kai's fingers trembled as he tapped the reinforced glass, separating him from the howling vacuum where an ocean had been. The floating city of New Atlantis, mankind's crowning achievement of post-resource depletion engineering, now hung precariously over an ever-deepening abyss. Projections indicate total oceanic depletion within 72 hours, announced the clinical voice of Aria, the city's artificial intelligence system. Emergency protocols initiated, power conservation mode engaged. Kai didn't respond. His eyes were fixed on the distant shimmer of the creature's body, iridescent scales that seemed to bend light in ways that defied physics, creating a hypnotic pattern against the darkening sky. There was something eerily beautiful about the apocalypse, he thought, something almost poetic about humanity's end coming not from their own self-destructive tendencies, but from something so utterly beyond their comprehension. "Dr. Mercer," a voice called from behind him. "The council is waiting." Kai turned to face his assistant, Lila Zhang. Unlike him, she hadn't slept in the 3 days since the creature's arrival. Her expertise in computational xenobiology had made her the most sought-after scientist in what remained of civilization. "What's the point?" Kai asked, his voice hollow. "What can the council possibly hope to achieve? We've thrown everything we have at that thing. Nuclear warheads, antimatter charges, gravitational disruptors, nothing even scratches it." Lila's expression hardened. "The point, Dr. Mercer, is that we're still alive, which means we still have a responsibility to fight. You of all people should understand that." The unspoken accusation hung between them like a physical presence. You of all people, who lost your wife to the unknown. You of all people, who swore to protect humanity from extraterrestrial threats. Kai's hand reflexively went to the pendant around his neck, a small vial containing a strand of his wife's DNA, preserved in amber-colored resin. Elena Mercer, the brilliant geneticist whose work on extraterrestrial biological adaptation had made Kai's own research possible. Elena, whose life had been claimed by the very mysteries she sought to unravel. "The Resistance Alliance has uncovered something," Lila continued, her voice softening slightly. "Something in Elena's final research notes." Kai's head snapped up. "What?" "They're calling it the kill code, a genetic sequence that could potentially trigger self-destruction in xenobiological entities." For the first time in 3 days, Kai felt a flicker of something other than despair. Not quite hope, he'd abandoned hope the moment the creature had appeared, but something adjacent to it. Purpose? Perhaps. "Show me," he said. As they made their way through the labyrinthine corridors of New Atlantis' research sector, Kai couldn't help but marvel at how quickly humanity had adapted to catastrophe. The floating city had been designed to house 1 million of Earth's wealthiest citizens, a sanctuary from the resource wars and climate collapse that had defined the 22nd century. Now, it teemed with refugees from coastal cities worldwide, its population swollen to nearly 3 million desperate souls. The council chamber was a cacophony of arguments when they arrived. Representatives from what remained of Earth's nations shouted over one another, their faces contorted with fear and anger. At the center of the chaos stood Marshal Arlo Grant, the imposing commander of Earth's unified military forces. His weathered face was a mask of barely contained rage. "We don't have time for more scientific theorizing," Grant bellowed, slamming his fist on the holographic display table. I have 27 thermonuclear warheads ready to deploy. We hit the creature's neural cluster with everything we've got, or we all die anyway. And risk triggering a defensive response that could wipe out what's left of humanity? Countered a slender woman whom Kai recognized as the representative from the African Union. The creature has thus far ignored human presence entirely. Its focus appears solely on water extraction. For now, Grant growled. But once it's drained our oceans, what do you think it will consume next? The atmosphere? Our biomass? We strike now, while we still can. Kai cleared his throat, and the chamber fell silent as all eyes turned to him. His reputation preceded him, the widower scientist, the man who had predicted the possibility of intelligent extraterrestrial life forms with biological technologies beyond human comprehension. The man who had been dismissed as paranoid until 3 days ago. Marshal Grant, Kai said, his voice steady despite the exhaustion weighing on him. Your warheads would be as effective as throwing stones at a tsunami. This entity exists partially in dimensions we can't even perceive. Conventional weapons, even nuclear ones, would be meaningless. Grant's eyes narrowed. Then what do you propose, Doctor? That we hold hands and sing songs as we watch our planet die? I propose we try to understand what we're dealing with before we antagonize it further. Kai replied, and I believe we may have found a way to do that. He nodded to Lila, who activated her datapad. Above the central table, a holographic display flickered to life, showing a complex molecular structure that rotated slowly in the air. This is what we've tentatively identified as the creature's genetic structure. Lila explained. Unlike terrestrial DNA, it appears to use a 12-base system rather than our 4-base system. However, we've discovered what appears to be a self-destruct sequence embedded within it. A genetic failsafe that, if activated, could theoretically cause a cascading breakdown of the creature's biological systems. A kill switch, Grant said, a predatory gleam in his eyes. A kill code, Kai corrected. And we have reason to believe my late wife discovered it 5 years ago during her research on exobiological specimens recovered from the Jupiter expedition. The chamber erupted into murmurs of disbelief and hope. If such a code exists, the European Union representative asked, why wasn't it shared with the global scientific community? Kai's expression darkened. Because the specimens she was studying were classified beyond top secret. Because certain military and corporate interests, he shot a pointed look at Grant, preferred to explore weaponization rather than understanding. Elena died in what was officially classified as a laboratory accident 3 days after she reported her findings. Grant's face remained impassive, but Kai could see the subtle tightening around his eyes. The Marshal had been involved in the Jupiter Expedition Oversight Committee. He would have seen Elena's reports. That's ancient history. Grant dismissed with a wave of his hand. What matters now is whether this kill code actually works and how we can deploy it. That's the problem, Lila interjected. The code sequence in Elena's notes is incomplete. We have what appears to be a primer, a genetic key that could activate the full sequence, but the complete code itself is missing from all official records. Then it's useless, Grant concluded, turning back to the military contingent. We proceed with Operation Spear of... I know where it is. Kai interrupted, his hand once again going to the pendant around his neck. Elena wouldn't have trusted her discovery to digital records that could be erased or altered. She would have preserved it in a way that only I would understand. He unclasped the pendant and held it up. The amber resin caught the light, revealing the delicate strand of DNA suspended within. This isn't just a memento, he explained, his voice thick with emotion. It's a message. Elena encoded the complete kill code within her own DNA, then preserved this sample for me to find. She knew that if a threat like this ever materialized, I would recognize what she had done. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. How long will it take to extract and analyze the code? Grant finally asked, his tone marginally less hostile. Kai exchanged glances with Lila. With the equipment available on New Atlantis, perhaps 48 hours, but that's only the beginning. Once we have the code, We need a delivery system, a way to introduce it into the creature's biological matrix. My team has been working on that, Lila said. We've developed prototype biosynthetic drones. We call them the Nautilus units, that could theoretically navigate the creature's internal systems and deliver a genetic payload directly to its neural cluster, which would still require someone to pilot a craft close enough to launch these drones. Grant pointed out, within the gravitational distortion field surrounding the creature. I volunteer, came a voice from the back of the chamber. A solidly built man with bronze skin and close-cropped black hair stepped forward. Raul Estevez, former deep space navigator. I've flown through the Jupiter gravity wells and survived. If anyone can get close enough to this thing, it's me. Kai studied the man, recognizing the same haunted determination he felt within himself. What did you lose, Captain Estevez? A muscle in Raul's jaw twitched. My entire family was in Lima when the coastal evacuation failed. The city collapsed into the emptying Pacific Trench 2 days ago. Kai nodded in understanding. Loss created a particular kind of courage, the kind born from having nothing left to fear. Then it's settled, Kai announced, looking around the chamber. We extract the kill code, program the Nautilus drones, and Captain Estevez delivers them to the target. No nuclear strikes, no further provocations until we've attempted this approach. Grant looked like he wanted to object, but the mood in the chamber had shifted. For the first time since the creature's arrival, there was a plan, a glimmer of possibility in the darkness. 48 hours, Grant conceded grudgingly. But I'm keeping my warheads on standby. If your plan fails, Dr. Mercer, we do things my way. As the council dispersed, Lila approached Kai, her expression troubled. You know that even if we extract the code from Elena's DNA, we have no way of testing it before deployment, she said quietly. If it fails, then humanity tried to save itself with science and understanding rather than blind destruction. Kai replied, Elena would have wanted that, at least. He looked out through the chamber's viewport, where the massive, sinuous body of the space serpent undulated against the stars, its scaled surface reflecting the light of a sun it was gradually cutting Earth off from. Besides, he added grimly, what's the worst that could happen? That we all die? That's already the most likely outcome. Lila didn't respond, but her hand briefly touched his shoulder, a gesture of solidarity between two scientists facing the end of their world. Behind them, the holographic display continued to rotate, the complex molecular structure of the creature's genetic code spinning in silent testimony to the task that lay ahead. Somewhere within that alien DNA lay the key to humanity's survival, a key that Elena Mercer had discovered and died for, and that Kai now had 48 hours to use before the oceans of Earth disappeared forever. The laboratory that had been hastily reassigned to Kai and Lila hummed with activity. A team of 20 scientists, the best minds salvaged from research institutions around the globe, worked in focused silence, each assigned to a specific aspect of what they had come to call Project Lazarus. The irony of the name wasn't lost on Kai. They weren't trying to resurrect the dead, but to kill something that, by terrestrial standards, shouldn't even be alive. Extraction complete, announced Dr. Yumi Tanaka, the team's leading geneticist. Her fingers moved deftly over the holographic interface as she transferred the DNA sample from Elena's pendant into the sequencing chamber. Beginning analysis now. Kai stood back, watching as the machine hummed to life. The strand of his wife's DNA appeared on the main screen, magnified to show its intricate double helix structure. To the untrained eye, it would appear normal, just another human genetic code. But Kai knew what to look for. There, he said, pointing to a section of the strand that seemed subtly different from the rest. Elena was brilliant at molecular steganography. She's hidden the kill code within a non-coding region of her own DNA. Lila leaned closer to the display. It's elegant, she murmured. Using redundant sections that wouldn't affect her own biological functions. The alterations are so subtle they'd be dismissed as natural mutations in any standard analysis. She knew someone would be looking, Kai said quietly. Someone who didn't want this code to be found. The implication hung in the air. Elena's accident had never felt random to Kai. The timing, just days after her discovery, had been too convenient. But he'd been too consumed by grief to pursue the truth, retreating instead into his research, building walls around his heart with each new publication, each new accolade. I need to speak with Marshal Grant, Kai decided abruptly. There's something he's not telling us about the Jupiter expedition, something that might help us understand what we're dealing with. Should I come with you? Lila offered. Kai shook his head. No. I need you here, overseeing the extraction. If I'm not back in 2 hours... He hesitated. Proceed without me. The kill code is what matters now, not old conspiracies. He found Grant in the Military Command Center, a repurposed entertainment hall now filled with tactical displays and communication equipment. The Marshal was hunched over a holographic representation of the space serpent, studying it with the calculating eyes of a predator assessing prey. Dr. Mercer, Grant acknowledged without looking up. I assume you have an update on your miracle cure? Not yet, Kai replied, stepping closer. But I do have questions about the Jupiter expedition, about what Elena really found there. Grant's posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. That mission was classified for good reason, Doctor. The public wasn't ready for... The public is watching an alien entity drain our oceans. Kai cut in. I think we're past concerns about public readiness. What did you find on Jupiter's moon Europa that Elena was studying? What was the actual specimen? Grant straightened, fixing Kai with a hard stare. After a long moment, he sighed and tapped a command into his wrist unit. The displays around them went dark, and a subtle hum indicated that a privacy field had been activated. It wasn't a specimen, Grant admitted. It was a fragment, a scale, approximately 2 meters long, discovered embedded in the ice of Europa during the mining operation. Analysis indicated it was biological in nature, composed of materials unknown to terrestrial science, and carrying a genetic structure unlike anything we'd ever seen. A scale, Kai repeated, the implications dawning on him. From the same species as our visitor. Grant nodded grimly. We believe so. The genetic markers are similar, though the fragment appeared to be centuries, possibly millennia old. Your wife was the first to suggest that it might be part of a living organism rather than an artifact. The first to decode portions of its genetic structure, and the first to discover the kill code, Kai concluded, which made her dangerous. Grant's expression hardened. I had nothing to do with what happened to Elena Mercer. By the time I learned of her discovery, she was already dead. The official report... Spare me the official report, Kai snapped. I want to know why. Why keep this secret? Why not prepare humanity for the possibility that these creatures existed? Because we hoped to weaponize the technology before they arrived. Grant admitted bluntly. The biological capabilities of that single scale were beyond anything human science had achieved. Self-healing materials, molecular structures that could alter their properties in response to thought patterns. Energy conversion systems that defied our understanding of physics. Imagine what we could do with such technology. So instead of warning humanity, you chose to exploit the discovery. Kai said bitterly. And now we're all paying the price. Grant's eyes flashed with anger. We had no way of knowing if or when one of these creatures would appear. For all we knew, the scale was millions of years old, from a species long extinct. I made a tactical decision based on the information available, and Elena paid for that decision with her life. Your wife's death was a tragedy, Dr. Mercer. But right now, I need you focused on preventing billions more. Is the kill code viable or not? Kai wanted to punch the man, to release 5 years of grief and rage in one violent moment. Instead, he took a deep breath, forcing himself to focus on the present crisis. We're extracting it now. But there's something else you should know. Based on the genetic structure we're seeing, I don't believe the creature is hostile, at least not intentionally. Grant scoffed. It's draining our oceans. I'd call that pretty damn hostile. It's consuming a resource it needs. Kai countered. The same way humans harvest crops or mine minerals. There's no indication it even recognizes us as intelligent life. Its neural patterns suggest a consciousness so alien to our own that communication may be impossible. All the more reason to kill it before it kills us. Or all the more reason to try to understand it before we commit xenocide. Kai argued, what if it's not alone? What if it's part of a species that could either destroy us utterly or open up possibilities beyond our imagination? Grant studied him for a long moment. You sound like Elena now. She made the same arguments, wanted to attempt communication rather than weaponization. She was right. Perhaps, Grant conceded reluctantly. But we've passed the point where ethical debates matter. Doctor, that thing will have consumed all of Earth's oceans within days. After that, as the representative said, who knows what it will target next? Our atmosphere? Our biomass? We can philosophize about interspecies understanding after we've ensured our survival. Kai couldn't argue with the man's basic logic, however much he despised his methods. Humanity's extinction would render all ethical considerations moot. The kill code should be extracted within 24 hours, he said finally. Lila's team is preparing the Nautilus drones for deployment immediately after. I'll be going with Captain Esteves on the delivery mission. Grant's eyebrows rose. That wasn't part of the plan, Doctor. It is now. The code may require adjustments based on what we encounter inside the creature. I'm the only one qualified to make those adjustments in real time. It's a suicide mission, Grant pointed out. The gravitational distortions alone could tear your craft apart, even before you reach the creature's outer membrane. Kai smiled thinly. As you said, Marshal, we're past the point where such concerns matter. I'm going. He turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. If this fails and you resort to your nuclear option, know that you'll likely trigger a defensive response that will annihilate what remains of humanity. The creature's outer scales can redirect energy. A nuclear strike would simply be absorbed and potentially redirected back at Earth. You seem very certain of that. Elena was certain, Kai replied, and I trusted her judgment implicitly. He left Grant standing alone among his war plans, hoping that the man had enough sense to heed the warning. Yet knowing that military minds like his rarely changed course once set. Back in the laboratory, Kai found Lila bent over a workstation, her face illuminated by the glow of a containment field. Within the field hovered what appeared to be a metallic sphere about the size of a human fist, its surface etched with intricate patterns that shifted and flowed like liquid. Is that one of the Nautilus units? Kai asked, approaching. Lila nodded without looking up. The prototype. It's a fusion of our most advanced nanotechnology with biomimetic systems based partly on the genetic data from the Europa fragment. You had access to that data? Kai was surprised. He'd assumed the military had kept it completely compartmentalized. Not officially, Lila admitted with a faint smile. But Elena and I corresponded regularly before her death. She shared certain insights that weren't included in her official reports. Nothing classified, just theoretical applications that helped us develop the Nautilus concept. Kai felt a pang of gratitude toward his late wife. Even in death, she was helping humanity fight for survival. How many units can we deploy? He asked. 12 fully functional units, plus 3 backup cores. Each one carries enough of the synthesized kill code to theoretically trigger the self-destruct sequence. But ideally, we'd want multiple units to deliver their payloads to different neural clusters to ensure complete coverage. Kai watched as the Nautilus prototype morphed, extending tentacle-like appendages that undulated with surprising grace. They're beautiful, he murmured. And deadly, Lila added. At least to our visitor. The delivery mechanism uses a molecular drill that can penetrate the creature's neural tissue and inject the kill code directly into its genetic matrix. Have you briefed Captain Esteves on the deployment procedure? Lila nodded. He's in simulator training now, practicing maneuvers through the projected gravitational field. The man's either incredibly brave or has a death wish. Probably both, Kai replied. Most of us do, at this point. He hesitated, then added, I'm going with him. Lila's head snapped up, her eyes widening. That's insane. Kai, the mission parameters don't require your presence. The Nautilus units are fully autonomous once deployed. The parameters have changed. Grant confirmed that the creature is related to the Europa fragment Elena was studying. That means her kill code is our best chance, but it might require adjustments based on what we find inside. I need to be there. Then I'm coming too, Lila declared without hesitation. Kai shook his head firmly. No. If something goes wrong, if the mission fails, you're the only one who fully understands both the kill code and the creature's biology. You'll be humanity's second chance. The unspoken truth hung between them. There would be no second chance. If the mission failed, if the creature continued consuming Earth's oceans, humanity's extinction was all but certain. But Kai couldn't bring himself to voice that reality. And Lila was kind enough not to force the issue. How soon can the Nautilus units be ready? He asked instead. 12 hours for final programming and testing. We're incorporating the kill code as it's extracted from Elena's DNA. Kai nodded. And the delivery vessel? Captain Estaves has selected a modified atmospheric skimmer, small enough to maneuver through the gravitational eddies but with enough power to reach the creature's neural cluster at the approximate 200-kilometer mark. He's calling it the Minnow. If you can believe it, man has a dark sense of humor. Despite everything, Kai found himself smiling. We'll need that where we're going. As if on cue, the laboratory doors slid open and Raul Estavizer strode in, his flight suit bearing the insignia of the former South American Space Coalition. The man moved with the easy confidence of someone intimately familiar with the edge between life and death. Dr. Mercer, he greeted with a curt nod. I hear you're joining my suicide run. Someone needs to make sure your sacrifice isn't wasted, Kai replied, matching the pilot's blunt tone. Estevez's mouth quirked in what might have been the ghost of a smile. Fair enough. Just don't touch any of my controls, and we'll get along fine. He turned to Lila. How are my little metal squids coming along? The Nautilus units will be ready in 12 hours, Captain, she assured him. They're designed to respond to your neural interface as well as to Dr. Mercer's in case of emergency. Let's hope it doesn't come to that, Estaves said, his expression growing serious. The simulator runs are showing massive gravitational shear around the creature's feeding apparatus. We'll be lucky to get within deployment range without being crushed or torn apart. Then we'll have to be lucky, Kai said simply. Esteves studied him for a moment, then nodded as if coming to a decision. My pre-flight briefing is at 0600 tomorrow. Be there or I leave without you. He turned to go, then added over his shoulder. And doctor, get some sleep. Where we're going, fatigue kills faster than fear. After the pilot left, Kai found himself staring at the Nautilus prototype, watching its hypnotic movements within the containment field. There was something almost meditative about its fluid grace, its perfect marriage of technology and biological design. He's right, you know, Lila said softly. You should rest. I can monitor the extraction process. Kai shook his head. I'll rest when it's done. Or when I'm dead, he added silently. Either way, oblivion waited. The only question was whether it would claim him alone or all of humanity alongside him. As if sensing his dark thoughts, Lila placed a hand on his arm. Elena would be proud of what you're doing. The simple statement hit him with unexpected force. Would Elena be proud? Or would she be horrified that her discovery, her kill code, was about to be used to extinguish a life form of unprecedented complexity and scale? He'd never know. That uncertainty was yet another loss to add to the tally of what the space serpent had taken from him. Let's get back to work, he said, pushing the thought away. The time for ethical debates, as Grant had pointed out, had passed. All that remained was survival, at any cost. The extraction of the kill code continued through the night, the laboratory's lights never dimming as the team worked in shifts to decode and synthesize the complex genetic sequence hidden within Elena's DNA. By morning, they had succeeded. a testament to human ingenuity in the face of extinction. The complete kill code, a sequence of exotic molecular compounds that would trigger cascade failure in the creature's biological systems, was ready for loading into the Nautilus units. As dawn broke over what remained of the Pacific Ocean, now a vast, deepening crater with New Atlantis hovering precariously near its edge, Kai made his way to the launch bay where the minnow waited. The vessel lived up to its name, appearing almost comically small against the enormity of their task. A sleek, dart-shaped craft designed for atmospheric maneuvering. It had been hastily modified with additional shielding and propulsion systems for the unique challenges of their mission. Captain Estevez was already there, running through pre-flight checks with methodical precision. He acknowledged Kai with a nod, but continued his work without breaking concentration. The launch bay bustled with technicians making final adjustments to the craft, while nearby, Lila supervised the loading of the Nautilus units into a specialized deployment pod. "They're ready," she announced, approaching Kai with a data tablet. All 12 units programmed with the complete kill code. The primary delivery route is plotted to target the creature's central neural cluster, but we've included contingencies for secondary and tertiary targets if the primary proves inaccessible. Kai took the tablet, reviewing the technical specifications one last time. Everything appeared in order, yet doubt gnawed at him. So many variables, so many potential points of failure. The creature's biology was still largely a mystery. What if the kill code triggered an unexpected response? What if it had evolved defenses against its own genetic failsafe? "Second thoughts, Doctor?" Marshal Grant's voice came from behind him. Kai turned to find the military commander watching him with an unreadable expression. "Just being thorough," he replied. "Unlike some, I prefer not to rush into potential extinction events." Grant ignored the barb. "My warheads are standing down, as agreed. You have 24 hours to deploy your solution. After that..." He left the implication hanging. "If we fail, your nuclear option won't save humanity," Kai reminded him. "It will only ensure our end comes in fire rather than drought." "Perhaps," Grant conceded, "but I'd rather humanity went down fighting than waiting passively for the end." He extended his hand, a gesture that surprised Kai. "Good luck, Dr. Mercer. Despite our differences, I hope you succeed." Kai hesitated, then accepted the handshake. "For Elena," he said quietly. Something like recognition flickered in Grant's eyes. "For all of us," he amended. A klaxon sounded, signaling 15 minutes to launch. Technicians began clearing the bay, securing equipment and retreating behind protective barriers. Estevez emerged from the minnow's cockpit, beckoning to Kai. "Time to board, Doctor. Our window of opportunity is narrow. The creature's feeding cycle creates brief periods of gravitational stability that we need to exploit." Lila approached, holding a sleek, form-fitting helmet. "Neural interface," she explained, handing it to Kai. "It will allow you to communicate with the Nautilus units directly if standard controls fail." "Thank you," Kai said, accepting the helmet. He hesitated, then added, "If we don't return..." "You will," she interrupted firmly. "Both of you. The Nautilus units have mapped the creature's internal structure as best they can from external readings. Follow their guidance, deliver the payload, and get out before the cascade begins." Kai nodded, knowing the reassurance was as much for her benefit as for his. The truth was, no one knew what would happen once the kill code was delivered. The creature's death throes could be catastrophic, potentially destroying anything within its vicinity, including the minnow and its crew. "Ready, Doctor," Estevez called from the cockpit entrance. "Ready," Kai confirmed, turning away from Lila with a final nod of determination. The interior of the minnow was cramped but functional. Every surface covered with controls, displays, or emergency equipment. Kai strapped himself into the co-pilot's seat as Estevez ran through the final launch sequence, his movements practiced and efficient. "Neural interface online," announced the craft's AI system. "Nautilus deployment pod secure. Life support nominal. Gravitational shielding at maximum capacity." Acknowledged. Estevez replied. Launch control. This is Minnow. We are go for departure. Confirmed. Minnow, came the response from launch control. You are cleared for departure. Gravitational window opens in T-3 minutes and counting. Good luck and Godspeed. Estevez turned to Kai, his expression solemn. Last chance to back out. Doctor, no shame in it. This mission is beyond high risk. Kai shook his head. My wife died for this knowledge. I won't dishonor her sacrifice by abandoning it now. The pilot studied him for a moment, then nodded in respect. For what it's worth, I'm sorry about your wife. Losing someone to the unknown, it leaves a wound that never quite heals. You speak from experience. My partner was on the first Mars terraforming mission, Estevez explained, his hands continuing to move across the controls as he spoke. Dust storm collapsed their habitat dome. By the time rescue arrived, the entire team had suffocated. Standard equipment failure, they said. Nothing that could have been predicted. You didn't believe that, Kai guessed. Equipment designed to withstand Martian conditions doesn't just fail, Estevez said, his voice hardening. Someone cut corners, falsified safety reports, but the corporations running the mission buried the evidence. Too much money at stake to admit liability. The parallel to Elena's accident wasn't lost on Kai. Different circumstances, same story. Profits and power prioritized over human lives. It formed an unexpected bond between the two men. A shared understanding of loss and the determination it bred. T-1 minute to launch, announced the AI. Gravitational window approaching optimal parameters. Strap in tight, Estevez advised, pulling his own harness securely across his chest. The initial ascent will be rough. We need to clear New Atlantis' atmospheric bubble before engaging the main thrusters. Kai complied, feeling the restraints tighten automatically to his body contours. Through the viewport, he could see the launch bay doors sliding open, revealing a slice of the unnatural sky beyond, half familiar blue, half the eerie iridescence cast by the space serpent's undulating form. T-10 seconds, 9, 8. Estevez's hands danced across the controls, activating systems in rapid sequence. A 3, 2, 1. Launch. The Minnow shot forward, propelled by its initial boosters. The G-force pressed Kai back into his seat as they accelerated through the atmospheric barrier, the craft shuddering violently as it transitioned from the controlled environment of New Atlantis to the thinning air beyond. Atmospheric barrier cleared, Estevez reported, his voice steady despite the turbulence. Engaging main thrusters in 3, 2, 1. The craft lurched again as the more powerful engines ignited, sending them arcing upward toward the distant form of the space serpent. From this new vantage point, Kai could truly appreciate the creature's impossible scale. It stretched across the horizon like a vast, living constellation, its body reflecting and refracting sunlight in hypnotic patterns. The proboscis, the massive structure that connected the creature to Earth's oceans, was a twisting, undulating tube that disappeared into the deepening Pacific basin. My God, Kai breathed, awe momentarily overriding his scientific detachment. It's beautiful. Beautiful like a supernova, Estevez commented grimly. Magnificent to behold, deadly to approach. He adjusted their trajectory, the Minnow responding with impressive agility. First gravitational eddy approaching. Brace yourself. The warning came just in time. The craft suddenly jerked sideways as if struck by an invisible hand, then began to vibrate with increasing intensity. Warning lights flashed across the control panel. Gravitational shielding at 80% and dropping. The AI announced, structural integrity holding. Estevez's expression remained focused as he compensated for the forces battering the small craft. This is just the outer field, he explained tersely. The closer we get to the proboscis, the worse it will become. Kai watched the displays, monitoring the Nautilus deployment pod's status. The units remained stable, their delicate electronics and biological components protected by specialized shielding. So far, so good. They continued their ascent, the earth falling away beneath them as they approached the massive structure of the proboscis. From this distance, they could see the water being drawn upward, not in a continuous flow, but in discrete, spiral patterns that defied terrestrial physics. The creature isn't simply sucking up the water, Kai observed, fascinated despite their perilous situation. It's creating localized space-time distortions to channel it efficiently. Incredible. Save the scientific admiration for after we kill it, Estevez suggested dryly. Approaching primary insertion point, gravitational distortion intensifying. The minnow shuddered more violently now, alarms blaring as the shields struggled against forces they weren't designed to withstand. Kai gripped his seat as the craft spun through a particularly intense eddy, the viewport briefly filling with the dizzying spectacle of stars, Earth, and the creature's body all blurring together. Shields at 40%, the AI warned. Structural integrity compromised in sectors 3 and 5. Rerouting power from non-essential systems. Estevez responded, his fingers flying across the controls. Doctor, activate the neural interface. We need to prep the Nautilus units for immediate deployment once we reach the insertion point. Kai donned the neural interface helmet, feeling the strange, tingling sensation as it connected with his nervous system. Immediately, his perception expanded, the Nautilus units appearing in his mind's eye as points of light, awaiting his commands. Units activated, he confirmed, running final diagnostic checks. Through the neural link, he could feel the machine's readiness, their artificial intelligence systems primed for their task. There was something almost eager in their response, a quality that reminded him uncannily of Elena's own intellectual curiosity. Lila must have modeled aspects of their behavioral algorithms on his wife's research patterns. Insertion point in 30 seconds. Estevez announced. Once we breach the outer membrane, we'll have approximately 3 minutes before the creature's immune response activates. That's our window to reach the neural cluster, deploy the units, and get out. Understood, Kai acknowledged, mentally preparing the deployment sequence. The minnow approached what appeared to be a semi-transparent section of the proboscis, where the undulating structure thinned slightly. According to their scans, this was a point of minimal resistance, a place where the creature's outer scales overlapped less densely. Activating penetration charge, Estevez said, his finger hovering over a red control. In 3, 2, 1. A burst of concentrated energy shot from the minnow's forward array, striking the membrane with pinpoint precision. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, the surface rippled like disturbed water and parted, creating an opening just large enough for their craft to slip through. Go! 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 Estevez urged, ramming the thrusters to maximum as he guided the minnow through the breach. They were inside. The interior of the proboscis was unlike anything Kai had imagined. A vast, pulsing tunnel lined with structures that resembled a cross between blood vessels and fiber optic cables. Bioluminescent patterns raced along these structures, creating an otherworldly glow that bathed the cockpit in shifting blues and purples. Gravitational field stabilizing, the AI reported. Internal pressure equivalent to Earth standard, temperature rising but within tolerable parameters. Small mercies, Estevez muttered, navigating the tunnel with careful precision. Neural cluster location? Kai consulted the Nautilus units through his interface. Approximately 2 kilometers further up the proboscis, the units are detecting massive electrochemical activity in that region, consistent with a central processing node. The minnow advanced through the alien anatomy, its external cameras capturing images that would revolutionize xenobiology if they survived to share them. The tunnel occasionally branched or narrowed, forcing Estevez to make split-second navigational decisions. Throughout it all, the bioluminescent patterns continued their dance, seemingly responding to their presence. It knows we're here, Kai realized suddenly. The light patterns, they're changing in response to our movement, some kind of internal communication system. Is it going to attack? Estevez asked, tension evident in his voice. Kai studied the patterns, comparing them to the data flowing through his neural interface. I don't think so. Not yet, at least. It seems more curious than hostile, like it's trying to categorize us. Let's not give it time to decide we're a threat, then, the pilot suggested, increasing their speed slightly. Neural cluster? 1 kilometer ahead, the tunnel widens into a chamber-like structure. As they approached the neural cluster, the bioluminescence intensified, pulsing more rapidly. The tunnel expanded as predicted, opening into a vast spherical chamber crisscrossed with the same vessel-like structures they'd observed earlier, all converging on a central mass that glowed with intense blue-white light. There, Kai indicated, that's our target, the neural cluster. Estevez brought the minnow to a hover at a safe distance from the pulsing core. Deployment range achieved, Nautilus units ready. Ready, Kai confirmed, mentally activating the final deployment sequence through his neural interface. Units launching in 3, 2, 1. From the minnow's external pod, 12 sleek, metallic forms emerged, unfurling into their full configuration as they left the craft. Through his neural link, Kai could perceive the world as they did. Multiple spectra of light, complex chemical signatures, electromagnetic fields that human senses couldn't detect. The Nautilus units moved with perfect coordination, spreading out to approach the neural cluster from different angles. First unit approaching injection site. Kai narrated for Estevez's benefit. Preparing molecular drill. Through the unit's perception, he watched as the specialized apparatus extended, positioning itself against the neural tissue. The drill began to spin, generating a focused field that would allow it to penetrate without damaging surrounding structures. Penetration successful, Kai reported, injecting kill code sequence. The first unit delivered its payload, the genetically engineered material flowing into the creature's neural tissue. Immediately, the bioluminescent patterns around them changed, becoming more erratic, more intense. It's responding, Kai warned, accelerating deployment of remaining units. The other Nautilus drones moved in, each selecting a different section of the neural cluster. One by one, they penetrated the tissue and delivered their payloads, the kill code spreading throughout the creature's central nervous system. Last unit deploying now, Kai announced, watching through the neural interface as the 12th Nautilus positioned itself. Full deployment in 10 seconds. Estevez had the minnow's engines primed, ready for immediate retreat once the final payload was delivered. How long until the cascade failure begins? Unknown. Kai admitted. The code works by triggering a self-destruct sequence in the creature's own genetic structure. It could take minutes or hours to fully activate. The final Nautilus unit completed its injection. Deployment complete, Kai confirmed. All 12 payloads delivered successfully. Then let's get the hell out of here, Estevez declared, beginning to turn the craft. But before they could move, the chamber around them pulsed with blinding intensity. The bioluminescent patterns no longer flowed in orderly sequences, but flashed chaotically, like a system in panic. The neural cluster at the center began to contract and expand rapidly. What's happening? Estevez demanded, fighting to keep the minnow stable as new gravitational eddies formed around them. Kai checked the readings from the Nautilus units, which were now retreating back toward the minnow. The kill code is working, but the creature is fighting it. It's trying to isolate and neutralize the affected tissue. Can it stop the cascade? Theoretically, no. The code should spread faster than it can isolate. But Kai hesitated, a new understanding dawning as he analyzed the data streaming through his neural interface. This isn't just a reflex reaction. There's a pattern to the response, a deliberate strategy. Are you saying this thing is intelligent? Estevez asked incredulously. Not in the way we understand intelligence, Kai clarified. But yes, there's some form of conscious response happening here. The creature isn't just reacting instinctively, it's actively problem-solving. The implications were staggering, but there was no time to explore them. The chamber continued to pulse erratically, and now the tunnel behind them, their escape route, began to contract. We need to move, now, Estevez urged, pushing the minnow's thrusters to maximum. They shot toward the narrowing tunnel, the last of the Nautilus units barely making it back to their deployment pod before the opening constricted further. The craft shuddered as it squeezed through, structural warnings blaring across the control panel. Hull integrity at 23%, the AI warned. Breach imminent in multiple sectors. Reroute all available power to structural reinforcement, Estevez commanded, his hands steady despite the chaos around them. Kai monitored the Nautilus units, which continued to transmit data about the kill code's progress. The cascade has begun, he reported. The creature's central nervous system is shutting down in sections, but it's happening too slowly. At this rate, it would take hours for complete system failure. We don't have hours, Estevez pointed out grimly as they navigated the increasingly unstable tunnel. This thing is collapsing around us. We need to accelerate the process. Kai's mind raced through possibilities. The kill code was working, but the creature's immune system was fighting back more effectively than they'd anticipated. They needed to overwhelm it somehow, to trigger a more rapid cascade. The primer, he realized suddenly. Elena's original research mentioned that the full kill code required a primer, a genetic key that activates the self-destruct sequence. What if we're missing part of the primer? You said the code was complete, Estevez shouted over the blaring alarms. The code itself is complete, but the activation mechanism might be more complex than we realized. Kai accessed the Nautilus unit's genetic database through his neural interface. Elena theorized that the creature's genetic failsafe was an evolutionary adaptation, a way to prevent the species from growing too large or powerful. But such a mechanism would need to be keyed to a specific trigger. What kind of trigger? In terrestrial species with similar failsafes, it's often tied to the organism's own DNA, a form of genetic recognition that prevents accidental activation. Kai's eyes widened as understanding dawned. That's it. The Europa fragment, the scale. It wasn't just similar to our visitor, it was from the same individual creature. What are you saying? Estevez demanded, fighting to keep the minnow on course as the tunnel convulsed around them. I'm saying this creature has been here before. The scale found on Europa was from an earlier visit, possibly millennia ago. The kill code needs to recognize the creature's specific genetic signature to fully activate. Kai's fingers flew across his control panel. I need to modify the remaining Nautilus units. We've already deployed all 12. But they're still transmitting, still connected to the neural cluster. I can update their programming remotely. Through his neural interface, Kai reached out to the deployed units, still embedded in various parts of the neural cluster. Their artificial intelligence systems responded to his commands, beginning to synthesize a new compound based on the data from Elena's original research. What exactly are you doing? Estevez asked. His voice strained as he navigated a particularly violent section of the collapsing tunnel. Creating a complete primer based on the creature's own current genetic signature, Kai explained. The Nautilus units are sampling the tissue around them, identifying unique markers that will accelerate the kill code's recognition and activation. How long? 2 minutes to synthesis completion, then another minute for full distribution. Estevez swore under his breath. We don't have 3 minutes, Doctor. Exit point is closing fast. Through the viewport, Kai could see the breach point where they'd entered, now reduced to half its original size and shrinking rapidly. Beyond it, the vastness of space beckoned, tantalizingly close, yet potentially unreachable. We need to buy time, Kai decided. Can you circle back, approach the neural cluster again? You want to go back? Estevez asked incredulously. That's suicide. If we can distract the creature, direct its attention and immune response toward us instead of the kill code, it might slow the closure of the exit point. Estevez looked like he wanted to argue, but instead nodded grimly and executed a tight turn, sending the minnow back toward the central chamber. The maneuver bought them precious seconds as the creature's automatic defenses tracked their movement, temporarily pausing the contraction of the exit tunnel. Synthesis at 60%, Kai reported, monitoring the Nautilus units through his neural interface. The primer is working. I can see changes in the tissue response already. The minnow circled the perimeter of the neural chamber, drawing the creature's attention. The bioluminescent patterns followed their movement, focusing on the small craft rather than the Nautilus units still embedded in the neural tissue. Synthesis complete, Kai announced finally. Distributing enhanced primer now. Through the neural link, he commanded the Nautilus units to release their newly synthesized compound. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The neural cluster pulsed with blinding intensity, the bioluminescent pattern shifting from chaotic flashing to a steady, ominous red glow. It's working, Kai confirmed, analyzing the data streaming through his interface. The cascade is accelerating exponentially, complete neural shutdown in approximately 5 minutes. Which means this whole structure will start collapsing in less than that. Estevez concluded, time to go. He swung the minnow around once more, pushing the engines beyond their safety limits as they raced back toward the exit point. The tunnel was convulsing more violently now, sections of it rupturing to reveal the strange, multi-dimensional anatomy beneath. Exit point in 30 seconds, Estevez called out. It's still closing. Kai watched through the viewport as the opening to space grew smaller with each passing moment. By the time they reached it, it would barely be large enough for the minnow to squeeze through, if at all. We're not going to make it, he realized. The craft was too damaged, too slow. Even at maximum thrust, they would reach the exit point several seconds after it closed completely. Unless... The Nautilus units, Kai said suddenly. They're still operational, still connected to the creature's neural system. What about them? I can redirect them to the exit point, use them to hold it open just long enough for us to get through. Estevez shot him a skeptical glance. Those tiny drones against the muscle mass of this thing, it's like using toothpicks to prop open a hydraulic door. They don't need to overpower it, Kai explained, already sending commands through his neural interface. Just disrupt the neural signals controlling the contraction for a few critical seconds. The remaining Nautilus units detached from the neural cluster and shot ahead of the minnow, racing toward the exit point. There, they positioned themselves around the perimeter of the narrowing opening, extending their molecular drills into the surrounding tissue. On my mark, Kai instructed, timing the approach carefully. 3, 2, 1. Now! The units activated simultaneously, sending targeted electromagnetic pulses into the creature's tissue. The contraction of the exit point halted momentarily, disrupted by the conflicting neural signals. Go, Kai urged. Estevez needed no further prompting. He slammed the thrusters to emergency override, sending the minnow hurtling toward the opening. The craft shuddered violently as it scraped against the edges, warning lights flashing across every display as systems failed under the strain. Hull breach in sections 4 and 7, the AI announced. Emergency seals engaged. For a terrifying moment, the minnow seemed stuck, caught between the inexorable pressure of the closing exit and the vacuum of space beyond. Then, with a final surge from the straining engines, they broke free, tumbling into the relative safety of open space. Behind them, the exit point sealed completely, severing their connection to the Nautilus units still embedded in the creature's tissue. Through his neural interface, Kai felt their signals fade one by one as they were crushed or absorbed. We made it, Estevez breathed, his hands finally relaxing their death grip on the controls. I can't believe we actually made it. But their escape was far from complete. The minnow drifted away from the massive form of the space serpent, its engines struggling to maintain minimal thrust. The damage from their narrow escape had compromised nearly every system. They were limping rather than flying. Gravitational disturbance detected, the AI warned, massive energy fluctuations in the creature's primary body. Through the viewport, they watched as the space serpent began to convulse, its sinuous form writhing against the backdrop of stars. The proboscis connecting it to Earth's oceans shuddered violently, expanding and contracting in irregular pulses. The cascade failure has reached critical mass, Kai observed, monitoring the few remaining data streams from his neural interface. The creature's entire biological system is shutting down. How long until it's completely neutralized? Estevez asked, working to stabilize their trajectory away from the dying entity. Minutes, perhaps. but the death throes could be catastrophic. Kai studied the readouts with growing concern. The energy contained within its body is incalculable. As systems fail, that energy will be released in unpredictable ways. As if in confirmation of his warning, a massive energy pulse emanated from the creature's body, washing over the minnow with enough force to send them tumbling end over end. Emergency systems blared as the craft struggled to compensate. "Stabilizers failing," Estevez reported, fighting with the controls. "We're being pulled into the gravitational wake." Kai looked out at the dying space serpent, witnessing firsthand the consequences of their actions. The creature was in its final moments, its body beginning to disintegrate from within as the kill code completed its work. But in its death, it was creating a gravitational maelstrom that threatened to drag them down with it. The ocean, Kai realized suddenly. Where will the water go when the proboscis disintegrates? Estevez's eyes widened as the implication hit him. Back to Earth, all at once. A tsunami of unprecedented scale, Kai confirmed grimly. The coastlines, New Atlantis. Nothing we can do about that now, Estevez pointed out, still struggling to navigate away from the gravitational pull. We need to focus on surviving this. Another energy pulse hit them, stronger than the first. The minnow systems flickered, power fluctuating as the surge overloaded their already damaged circuits. Main power at 12%, the AI reported, life support compromised, emergency oxygen activated. Kai realized with cold clarity that they weren't going to escape. The minnow was too damaged, the gravitational forces too strong. They had succeeded in their mission, the space serpent was dying, but they wouldn't live to see the aftermath. There might be a way, he said slowly, an idea forming. A way to mitigate the tsunami, at least. Estevez glanced at him sharply. What are you thinking? The creature's neurological shutdown is proceeding from the center outward. The proboscis is still partially functional, still maintaining the gravitational field that's holding the water. Kai tapped his neural interface. If I can access the creature's neural network directly, I might be able to control the collapse sequence, slow it down enough to allow the water to return gradually rather than all at once. Access it how? The Nautilus units are gone. Kai held up his neural interface helmet. Not through them. Directly. This interface was designed to connect with their artificial intelligence systems, but with modifications, it could potentially link to the creature's own neural patterns. That's insane, Estevez protested. Even if it were possible, the feedback alone could fry your brain. It's a risk I'm willing to take, Kai said firmly. Billions of lives are at stake, including those in New Atlantis. The pilot studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. What do you need me to do? Get us as close to the proboscis as you can. I need physical contact with the neural tissue to establish a direct link. Estevez didn't waste time arguing further. Despite the dangers, he adjusted their course, using what remained of the minnow's thrusters to guide them toward the massive, convulsing structure of the proboscis. As they approached, Kai modified his neural interface, overriding safety protocols and amplifying its connection capabilities. What he was attempting had never been done before. Direct neural interfacing with an alien life form of unimaginable complexity. The risk of permanent brain damage or death was extreme, but compared to the alternative, billions dead in a global tsunami, it was a risk he had to take. Close enough for EVA, Estevez announced as they reached a position alongside the proboscis. But the suit systems are as damaged as everything else. You'll have limited oxygen and no maneuvering thrusters. It'll have to do, Kai said, rising from his seat. If I'm not back in 10 minutes. I'll come after you, Estevez promised. Though both men knew it was a hollow gesture, neither of them was likely to survive what was coming. Kai donned the emergency EVA suit, checking its seals with methodical care despite the urgency of the situation. The neural interface helmet integrated with the suit's systems, its modified connections extending like delicate tendrils around the exterior. Ready? Estevez asked, hand hovering over the airlock controls. Kai nodded, unable to find words adequate for what might be their final exchange. The pilot seemed to understand, offering a simple salute before activating the sequence. The airlock cycled, and Kai found himself floating in the vacuum of space, face to face with the dying space serpent. From this close, its scale was truly incomprehensible, a living mountain of iridescent tissue that twisted and convulsed in its death throes. The proboscis pulsed with fading bioluminescence, each flash weaker than the last as the kill code completed its work. Using the suit's minimal propulsion, Kai guided himself toward a section of the proboscis where the outer membrane had begun to rupture, exposing the neural tissue beneath. As he approached, he could feel his neural interface responding, picking up electromagnetic signals from the creature's dying nervous system. When he reached the exposed tissue, he hesitated only briefly before pressing the modified interface against it. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. His consciousness expanded outward, connecting with something vast and alien, a mind so different from human thought that it defied comprehension. Images flooded his perception, ancient gas giants circling distant stars, the cold depths of interstellar space, worlds drained of their oceans, left barren and lifeless. He saw the creature's life cycle, how it traveled between water-rich planets over millennia, consuming what it needed before entering a dormant state to travel to the next feeding ground. Not malevolent, merely following its evolutionary imperative. A cosmic apex predator that had never encountered resistance before. And now it was dying, confused and in pain, unable to comprehend the microscopic entities that had delivered its death. Focusing through the torrent of alien thoughts, Kai searched for the neural pathways controlling the proboscis. The creature's consciousness was fading rapidly, control systems shutting down as the kill code spread, but there was still enough activity to potentially influence the final collapse. With immense effort, Kai directed his thoughts toward the proboscis structure, seeking to modify its dissolution sequence. The alien mind resisted initially, instinctively fighting the intrusion. Then, perhaps recognizing Kai as the architect of its end, it seemed to yield, not in surrender, but in curiosity. A final exchange between predator and prey. Through the neural link, Kai conveyed his intent, not to hasten the creature's death, but to modify its final moments to prevent further destruction. To his astonishment, he felt what could only be described as understanding in response, a recognition that its life was ending and a willingness to shape that ending. With the creature's cooperation, Kai accessed the neural controls of the proboscis. He couldn't prevent its collapse, but he could sequence it, create a gradual release of water rather than a catastrophic deluge. The modifications would buy Earth's coastlines precious hours to prepare, potentially saving millions of lives. As he worked, Kai became aware of another presence in the neural link, a familiar consciousness that felt impossibly like Elena. Not her actual spirit, he was scientist enough to reject such supernatural notions, but rather an echo of her thought patterns, preserved within the kill code she had created. In designing the genetic sequence, she had inadvertently imprinted aspects of her own neural architecture, creating a ghost in the machine that now recognized and responded to Kai's presence. The Phantom Elena guided him through the creature's neural pathways, helping him identify the critical control nodes for the proboscis. Together, they rewrote the final commands, programming a controlled dissolution that would return Earth's oceans over days rather than minutes. As the work neared completion, Kai became aware that his oxygen was running critically low. The suit's warnings flashed urgently across his display, but he couldn't disengage yet. The reprogramming was delicate, requiring constant adjustment as the creature's systems continued to fail. Finally, the task was done. The proboscis would collapse in stages, releasing the trapped oceans in manageable surges rather than a single apocalyptic wave. New Atlantis and other coastal settlements would have time to prepare, to evacuate vulnerable areas, to survive. Kai began to disengage from the neural link, preparing to return to the minnow. But as he attempted to withdraw, he found himself held in place, not by the creature's dying mind, but by the echo of Elena within the system. Her presence surrounded him, conveying not in words but in pure conceptual thought a final message: stay, complete the cycle, become part of what comes next. He understood then that the kill code had never been meant simply to destroy. Elena had discovered something more profound, a transformation protocol encoded within the creature's genetic failsafe. Not death, but rebirth. The space serpent wasn't just dying, it was evolving, shedding its current form to become something new. And it needed a catalyst, a genetic bridge between its biology and Earth's. It needed Kai. The choice was clear, though impossibly difficult. Return to the minnow, to Esteves, to a slim chance of survival as they attempted to escape the gravitational collapse, or remain, becoming part of whatever new form emerged from the creature's transformation, a symbiosis that Elena had somehow foreseen and prepared for. His oxygen was almost gone. The suit's systems were failing, and in the distance, the minnow drifted helplessly, caught in the gravitational eddies of the dying creature. With a final, silent apology to Esteves, Kai made his choice. He fully integrated his neural interface with the creature's systems, allowing his consciousness to merge with the alien mind and the echo of Elena that guided its transformation. His body convulsed as the connection deepened beyond safe parameters, biological and artificial systems fusing in ways never intended by their designers. The last thing he perceived as a separate, human entity was the sight of the proboscis beginning its controlled collapse, the first gentle surge of water returning to Earth's empty oceans. Then his individual awareness dissolved, becoming part of something larger, something evolving beyond his capacity to comprehend. Captain Raul Esteves watched from the crippled minnow as Dr. Kai Mercer's suit-clad form seemed to sink into the creature's tissue, disappearing from view as the proboscis began its strange, rhythmic pulses. Instead of catastrophic collapse, the structure was disintegrating in timed sequences, each pulse sending a measured portion of Earth's stolen oceans cascading back to the planet below. The scientist had succeeded, though at what appeared to be the cost of his own life. Esteves offered a silent salute to the man's sacrifice, then turned his attention to the impossible task of surviving long enough to tell the tale. 300 kilometers below, the citizens of New Atlantis watched in awe as the first waters returned to the Pacific Basin, not in a destructive tsunami, but in a controlled flow that gradually filled the empty seabed. Warning systems had been activated worldwide, coastal areas evacuated as a precaution. But the catastrophic flooding that had been feared never materialized. In the Resistance Alliance Command Center, Marshal Arlo Grant stood silently before the massive display showing the space serpent's disintegration. Beside him, Leela Zhang monitored the readings from Kai's neural interface, readings that defied scientific explanation. "He's still alive," she whispered, her voice caught between hope and horror. "Somehow, he's still transmitting." Grant studied the incomprehensible data streams. "Is that Mercer or something else using his neural signature?" "I don't know," Lila admitted. "The patterns are evolving, changing into something I don't recognize." Above them, the space serpent continued its strange, measured death. But unlike the violent end they had anticipated, this dissolution had an almost peaceful quality, less destruction than transformation. The creature's massive body was breaking down into smaller components, some dispersing into space, others forming new configurations that orbited Earth like living satellites. And at the center of it all, where the neural cluster had been, a new structure was taking shape. Neither fully alien nor recognizably human, but something unprecedented. A hybrid entity that carried within it the genetic legacy of both the space serpent and the man who had sacrificed himself to transform its end. In the hospital wing of the orbital station, where he had been evacuated after his miraculous rescue, Captain Raul Esteves awoke to find Leela Zhang by his bedside. Through the viewport beyond her, he could see Earth, its oceans restored, its continents once again surrounded by the blue that had defined their planet for billions of years. "How long?" he asked, his voice rough from disuse. 2 months, Lila replied gently. "You've been in recovery since the rescue team found you. Your craft was on the verge of complete system failure. It's a miracle you survived." Esteves's eyes drifted to the viewport again, fixing on a peculiar constellation that hadn't been there before. A formation of iridescent points that seemed to pulse with a familiar bioluminescence. And Dr. Mercer, the creature? Lila followed his gaze to the new celestial feature. There, together, transformed. We don't fully understand what happened, but the neural interface continued transmitting for weeks after the event. The data suggests some form of symbiotic merger, Kai's consciousness integrated with the alien genetics to create something new. Something dangerous? Estevez asked, the military pragmatism that had defined his career reasserting itself. We don't think so. Whatever it's become, it appears to be in a dormant, observational state. The xenobiologists are calling it a guardian form, a genetic sentinel that might protect Earth from other cosmic predators like the space serpent. She hesitated, then added, and it's not alone anymore. What do you mean? 3 days ago, we detected similar entities approaching from the outer solar system. Smaller versions of what Kai became. They've taken up positions in Earth orbit, forming what appears to be a defensive perimeter. Estevez absorbed this information in silence. After everything they had witnessed, nothing seemed impossible anymore. So we killed one cosmic threat only to create another? Or perhaps we've gained allies we never expected. Leela suggested. The neural transmissions we received before they faded completely. They weren't threatening, Raoul. They were protective, like a promise. A promise from whom? Mercer or the creature? Perhaps both. Perhaps neither. Lila's expression was contemplative. Elena Mercer's research suggested these entities aren't merely animals or even alien intelligences as we understand them. They're living embodiments of cosmic principles, evolutionary forces given physical form. What Kai did wasn't just a scientific achievement, it was a paradigm shift in humanity's relationship with the universe. Estevez wasn't sure he found that comforting, but he was too exhausted to argue the point. What happens now? Now we rebuild. New Atlantis and other coastal cities are being reestablished. The oceans have returned, though their ecosystems will need time to recover. Lila smiled faintly. And we prepare for a future where humanity is no longer alone in guarding its world. In the darkness of space, the entity that had once been Dr. Kai Mercer observed the planet of his birth. His consciousness had expanded beyond recognition. Encompassing perspectives and awareness, no human mind was designed to contain. Yet at his core remained the essential spark that had defined him, the scientist's curiosity, the husband's devotion, the human's capacity for sacrifice. Beside him, other entities gathered, the vanguard of a new symbiotic species born from the union of terrestrial and cosmic genetics. Not children exactly, but descendants, carrying forward the legacy of both Kai Mercer and the creature he had both destroyed and transformed. Through their collective awareness, Kai perceived the distant approach of other space serpents, ancient hunters drawn by the same resources that had attracted the first. But these new entities would find Earth protected now, guarded by beings who understood both worlds. The symbiotic guardians Kai now led were neither fully human nor entirely alien, but something unprecedented in the cosmos, a bridge between species, between ways of perceiving reality itself. In what remained of his human consciousness, Kai sometimes felt Elena's presence, not as the neural echo that had guided his transformation, but as a fundamental truth woven into his new existence. She had discovered not just a weapon, but a doorway to something greater. Her kill code had never been meant merely to destroy, but to catalyze evolution. In her final act of genius, she had seen beyond humanity's immediate survival to its cosmic potential. 10,000 years. The geneticists had estimated before the space serpent could regenerate from its transformed state. 10,000 years for humanity to grow, to learn, to prepare for either peaceful coexistence or renewed conflict with the cosmic forces that had nearly destroyed them. 10,000 years during which the hybrid guardians would watch and wait, neither fully part of human civilization nor entirely separate from it. Far below, in the restored oceans of Earth, New Atlantis rose again, Its floating structures expanded across the Pacific, no longer a refuge for the privileged few, but the foundation of a new civilization, one that understood both the fragility and resilience of their world. The waters that had once been stolen now teemed with life again, ecosystems rebuilding themselves with surprising speed under humanity's careful stewardship. In the archives of the Resistance Alliance, now transformed into a global research initiative, Elena Mercer's work became the cornerstone of a new scientific discipline, xenobiological integration. The knowledge extracted from the space serpent's genetic structure revolutionized medicine, energy production, space travel, every aspect of human technology. Marshall Grant, to everyone's surprise, became one of its strongest advocates, arguing passionately that understanding rather than weaponization was humanity's true path forward. Lila Zhang led this new scientific frontier, occasionally receiving cryptic transmissions from the entity that had once been her colleague and friend. These messages, mathematical formulas, genetic sequences, astronomical coordinates, guided human research in subtle ways, nudging civilization toward a greater cosmic awareness without directly intervening in its natural development. Captain Estevez found his purpose in training a new generation of pilots for the Joint Earth Guardian Expedition Force, humans who would eventually venture beyond the solar system with hybrid navigators as their guides. The loss of his family in Lima remained a wound that never fully healed, but in preparing humanity for its wider role in the universe, he found a measure of peace. And throughout it all, the transformed Kai watched, learned, and guided. A sentinel poised between worlds, between states of being. The man he had been was gone, yet not entirely lost. The creature whose death he had engineered lived on through him, its ancient wisdom now tempered by human compassion and curiosity. Together they had become something neither could have been alone, a harbinger of cosmic symbiosis, a living bridge between the finite and infinite. In the vast expanse of space, other intelligences took notice. The ripples of what had happened at Earth spread outward, altering subtle balances, challenging ancient assumptions. The space serpents were not the only cosmic forces that shaped the destiny of worlds. Others waited, watched, and wondered at the unprecedented union that had occurred on the third planet of an unremarkable yellow star. The entity that had been Kai Mercer felt their attention and prepared. The transformation had only begun. Humanity's evolution from planetary species to cosmic participant was taking its first tentative steps. And he would be there to witness it all, neither fully human nor entirely other. A living testament to what could emerge when destruction gave way to rebirth, when ending became beginning. In the endless cycle of cosmic renewal, Earth had found its place at last, not as conqueror or victim, but as catalyst, a world where something new had entered the universe, a possibility unforeseen by even the most ancient intelligences that drifted between the stars. And it had all begun with a single strand of DNA, encoded by a woman who had glimpsed the future and sacrificed everything to ensure it came to pass. In the silent depths of space, the entity that had been Kai Mercer acknowledged this truth and continued his eternal vigil, guardian, witness, and harbinger of what was yet to come.